Stand up sometime and just start walking, and after a few hours you'll feel it. The dull ache building in your legs, the hot spots on your feet, the quiet voice in your head asking how much farther. Now imagine that feeling never ending. Not for an afternoon. For your entire life, and your children's lives, and theirs. No car, no road, no map, no idea what's over the next hill, or whether anything is out there at all. Just your own 2 feet, a body built for heat, and an entire frozen, unknown planet waiting on the other side of the horizon. Somehow, that soft, slow, tropical animal, us, did not just wander a little. It walked out of one small corner of Africa and did not stop until it had touched nearly every scrap of land on Earth. Deserts, ice sheets, jungles, islands in the middle of empty oceans. How on earth did people with nothing conquer an entire world on foot? The answer is one of the most incredible stories our species has ever lived. It starts with a restlessness wired deep into us. For a long time, our ancestors lived in one warm region of Africa, and by every rule of nature, they should have stayed there. It was home. It was survivable. Leaving meant walking into places no human had ever seen, full of dangers no one could warn you about. And yet, generation after generation, some of them kept drifting outward, over the next ridge, across the next river, into the next valley. Not in one great heroic march, but slowly, a few miles a lifetime, following food and curiosity and the simple animal pull to see what was there. Something in us was never content to stay put. That itch you feel to travel, to get away, to see somewhere new, it is not a modern craving. It is the oldest engine in our species, the thing that quietly pushed us to the ends of the earth. And here is the strange gift that made it possible. On the surface, we are pathetic travelers. Slow, weak, no claws, no fur, easily outrun by almost anything. But stretch the distance out, and something flips completely. The human body is one of the greatest long-distance movers that has ever existed. We walk upright, which sips energy instead of burning it. We sweat from our whole bodies, cooling ourselves on the move while furry animals have to stop and pant in the shade. A horse is faster for a mile, but over a long, hot day, a determined human can walk almost anything into the ground. We were not built to win the sprint. We were built to never, ever stop. And that single ability is what let us cross a planet that should have been far too big for us. But nobody walks across the world for fun. So what actually pulled them onward, mile after mile? Food, mostly, on legs of its own. Ancient humans were hunters and gatherers, and their entire pantry moved. The great herds of animals migrated with the seasons, and the people followed them, because to follow the herd was to eat. A group would trail a river of bison or reindeer across enormous distances, and by the time a few generations had passed, they drifted 100 miles from where their grandparents were born, without anyone ever deciding to move. Add in the search for new fishing spots, new berry patches, new valleys untouched by other humans, and you get a species being gently, constantly, deliciously lured across the map. We didn't set out to explore the earth. We followed our stomachs, and the earth happened to be in the way. And then the walking ran out of land. Because sooner or later, every wanderer hits the sea. And this is where the story should have ended. A vast, cold, deadly stretch of open water, with unknown land somewhere far beyond it, or maybe nothing at all. Every sensible instinct says turn back. Instead, they built. With stone tools and plant fiber, ancient humans lashed together rafts and dug out canoes, and pushed off from the only world they knew, aiming at a horizon with no promise of anything on the other side. Some surely vanished and were never heard from again. But some made it. That is how humans reached islands scattered across the open ocean, and eventually crossed the water to Australia, tens of thousands of years ago, on boats we can barely imagine, steering by stars and swells. It was the first time any animal deliberately sailed into the unknown. And we did it with almost nothing. The land route was no gentler. To spread across the planet, humans had to walk straight into the one thing their tropical bodies were least built for: the cold. During the ice ages, the north was a frozen death world of wind and snow and dark. A warm weather ape had no business being there. But armed with fire they could carry, fitted fur clothing they learned to sew, and shelters they could raise from stone and bone, they went anyway. They pushed into frozen Europe and Asia, following the cold-adapted giants, mammoths, reindeer, deeper and deeper into the ice. Every mile north was a mile that should have killed them. And still they went, because on the far side of that frozen wall was more world, more space, more life. We did not wait for the planet to get friendlier. We invented our way into the parts that wanted us dead. Then came the greatest walk in the entire human story. Because the ice ages did something sneaky. They locked up so much of the ocean as ice that the sea level dropped, and land that is underwater today rose up dry. A bridge appeared, a wide, cold, grassy land connecting Asia to the Americas, where today there is only freezing sea. And humans, following the herds as always, simply walked across it. They crossed into a pair of entire continents that had never seen a single human being. Two enormous, empty new worlds, full of animals with no fear of people. Then the ice melted, the sea rose, and the bridge sank beneath the waves behind them, sealing those first Americans into a new world of their own. They didn't know they were the first. They were just following dinner across a bridge that would soon no longer exist. Now think about the truly terrifying part. They did all of this with no maps. None. No compass, no charts, no written directions, nothing. So how did they not simply get hopelessly, fatally lost? Because they carried the map inside their heads, and it was better than you'd believe. They read the land like a book, the shape of a mountain, the bend of a river, a lone strange rock that marked a turning. They followed the sun by day and steered by the fixed hours at night. They memorized enormous routes and passed them down as stories, songs, and landmarks, so a young person already knew a path their own feet had never walked. Their minds held living maps of thousands of square miles, drawn entirely from memory and handed down through generations. They never wrote the world down. They remembered it, and that memory is what kept them from being swallowed by it. And as they spread, the humans themselves began to change. Because when you scatter one species across an entire planet, each place quietly reshapes the people living in it. Under the strong equatorial sun, skin stayed dark for protection. In the dim, weak light of the far north, skin lightened to soak up what little sun there was. Bodies grew stockier in the cold to hold heat, leaner in the heat to shed it. Groups that wandered far from each other slowly grew different, in looks, in language, in the tools and stories they carried. This is the deep origin of nearly all the variety you see across humanity today. Not a beginning in many places, but a single restless family that walked out of one home and let 10,000 different lands slowly stamp themselves onto their children. But there was a price for being the animal that never stopped. Out at the front of that spreading wave were the true pioneers, the first humans to ever set foot in a valley, cross a strait, round a coast. And their lives were dangerous and often desperately lonely. They walked into lands where they had no idea which plants were food and which were poison, which animals were harmless, and which would hunt them in the dark. They had no elders who had been there before, no stories to warn them, no map at all, only their own courage and their own mistakes, paid for in lives. Every new corner of the earth that humans reached was reached by someone brave or desperate enough to step into the total unknown with nothing. We did not inherit a mapped world. Somebody somewhere was always the first, and being first was terrifying. So stand back and look at the whole impossible thing. From one small region of Africa, a slow, soft, furless animal spread out on foot until it covered nearly the entire planet. It outwalked faster animals by never stopping. It followed the herds across continents. It built boats and sailed into blank horizons. It walked into the killing ice and invented its way through. It crossed a land bridge into two empty new worlds and watched the door sink behind it. And it did all of it with no maps, no roads, no machines, just legs, fire, memory, and an itch that would not let it stay home. There has never been another animal like us. We are, every last one of us, the descendants of the greatest travelers the world has ever known. So the next time your legs ache after a long day, or you feel that restless pull to get away, to go somewhere, to see what's over the next hill, recognize it for what it actually is. That is not a modern mood. That is 100,000 years of ancestors who could not sit still, whispering in your blood. Every one of them walked so that you could be born exactly where you are. They crossed deserts and ice and open ocean on foot and by raft, with no map and no promise, following nothing but hunger and wonder, until their children stood on every shore of the earth. You come from the animal that took an entire planet one step at a time. That restlessness you feel is not a flaw. It is your inheritance, the oldest, wildest part of you, still quietly asking what's out there. If that made you look at the horizon a little differently, subscribe and stay curious.